The sky over the Misty Mountains did not crack with the fury of a storm or the malice of a wizard. Instead, it bled. A jagged crimson rift tore through the atmosphere, a wound in reality that spat out a single dark shape before sealing itself with a thunderous clap that echoed across the peaks of Caradhras. The object hit the snowy slopes with the force of a falling star, triggering an avalanche that buried the ancient stone in white silence. For several minutes, there was no movement. Then the snow began to pulse. A rhythmic, sickening throb, like the beating of a titan's heart, radiated from the impact site. A hand, or something that resembled a hand, burst through the frozen crust. It was composed of a shifting, obsidian-colored biomass, weaving together like 1,000 hungry serpents. As the figure pulled itself onto the surface, the biomass coalesced, hardening into the shape of a man wearing a tattered hoodie and a leather jacket. Alex Mercer opened his eyes, and for the first time in an eternity, the hive mind within him was silent. There were no satellites, no cell phone signals, no radio chatter of New York City. There was only the smell of pine, ancient earth, and the distant metallic tang of blood. Mercer stood up, his boots crunching on the snow. He didn't breathe because he didn't need to, but his sensors, the millions of viral receptors covering his skin, tasted the air. This world was old. It was saturated with a strange, lingering energy that defied the laws of physics he had consumed in the genetic laboratories of Gentech. He looked down at his hands and watching as the black-red tendrils of the blacklight virus danced under his skin. "Where am I?" he whispered, his voice a jagged rasp. He didn't wait for an answer. He needed data. He needed to consume. 2 miles down the mountain trail, a patrol of Uruks was tracking a group of refugees. The captain, a scarred brute with a white hand painted on his breastplate, stopped and sniffed the air. There was a scent he didn't recognize. Something cold, something sterile, yet rotting. He signaled his troop of 15 warriors to halt. From the shadows of the pine trees, a man stepped out. He looked fragile, dressed in strange, thin clothes that offered no protection against the biting wind. The Uruks captain laughed, a guttural sound of malice. "Look at this one. A lost manling from the south? Take his legs? Leave the rest for the crows." The Uruks charged, their heavy scimitars raised. Mercer didn't move until the first blade was inches from his throat. In a blur of motion faster than the elven eyes of old could track, his arm transformed. The flesh erupted, expanding and hardening into a massive, serrated blade of bone and muscle. With a single fluid horizontal sweep, the first 4 Uruks were not just killed, they were erased. The blade cut through their crude armor, their flesh, and their bone as if they were mist. Before the captain could even scream, Mercer was upon him. He didn't use the blade. He grabbed the Uruk by the throat, and the consumption began. Hundreds of red filaments shot out from Mercer's palm, burrowing into the Uruk's eyes, mouth, and pores. The creature's body withered in seconds, its biological matter, its memories and its very essence being sucked into Mercer's singular consciousness. A flood of images scorched Mercer's mind. He saw the pits of Isengard, the towering black fortress of Orthanc, the burning eye of a master he could not name, and the taste of man-flesh. He learned the black speech, the geography of the land called Rohan, and the looming war for a trinket made of gold. Mercer dropped the shriveled husk of the captain. He changed. His height increased, his skin turned a sickly bruised gray, and his clothes morphed into the crude iron plates of an Uruk. He spoke, and the captain's voice came out of his throat perfectly. "Isengard," Mercer muttered, testing the word. "Saruman." He turned to the remaining 10 Uruks, who stood frozen in a state of primal terror they had never felt before. They were bred for war, but this was not war. This was predation. "You," Mercer pointed a clawed finger at a trembling archer. "Tell me about this white wizard. Tell me how many souls he keeps in his tower." But he didn't wait for the answer. He shifted his weight, his legs bulging with the power of 100 horses, and leapt. He cleared 300 feet in a single bound, smashing into the center of the group. His arms transformed into massive, spiked hammers of biomass. Each strike sent shockwaves through the ground, turning the Uruks into heaps of broken meat. He consumed them all. Each one added a fragment of the puzzle. He felt the crude, violent architecture of their DNA, the magic that had birthed them in the mud, and he began to optimize it. The blacklight virus was evolving. It was no longer just a human pathogen. It was learning to infect the very fabric of Middle-earth's biology. As he finished the last of the patrol, Mercer looked toward the south. Far away, he could feel a presence, a massive, lidless gaze that searched the world. Sauron, the Dark Lord, felt a ripple in the tapestry of his domain. It wasn't the light of the Valor, nor the meddling of Gandalf. It was a cold, hungering void, a shadow that didn't just kill, but replaced. Mercer's face shifted back to his human likeness, though his eyes remained a glowing, predatory amber. He began to run. He didn't run like a man. He moved like a blurred streak of darkness, running vertically down the sheer cliffs, shattering the stone with every footfall. He was heading for Isengard. If this Saruman was a creator of life, then Mercer would be his undoing. He would consume the wizard, would he take his knowledge of the ancient world, and then he would turn the Uruk Hai into a true hive mind. By the time the sun began to set, casting long, bloody shadows over the plains of Rohan, Mercer had reached the outskirts of the ancient forest of Fangorn. He paused, feeling the trees watch him. They were alive, filled with a slow, deep consciousness. Mercer placed a hand on a massive oak. He could feel the sap flowing, the ancient memories of the Ents. For a moment, he considered consuming the forest itself, turning the trees into pillars of flesh and thorns. But he sensed a more immediate threat. A group of riders was approaching. The Rohirrim, 60 men on horseback, their spears glinting in the twilight. They had seen the smoke from his earlier skirmish. Mercer didn't hide. He stood in the middle of the road, his hoodie pulled up, his silhouette a lonely blot against the golden grass. "Halt!" cried the leader, a tall man with golden hair. "Who are you that walks openly in the lands of the Mark? Are you a spy for the traitor Saruman?" Mercer looked up. He didn't see men. He saw biomass. He saw 60 different nervous systems, 60 memories of the land's layout, 60 vessels of information. "I am the end of the world," Mercer said. The riders charged, their war cry, "Forth Eorlingus," ringing out. Mercer let out a low, guttural growl. His entire body exploded outward in a ground spike attack. Thick, jagged conduits of hardened flesh erupted from the earth for 50 yards in every direction. Horses were impaled before they could even scream. Men were tossed into the air like rag dolls. Mercer moved through the carnage like a ghost. He grabbed a falling rider by the face, absorbing him midair. He landed, spun, and his arm became a whip fist, a long, bladed tentacle that lashed out, decapitating 3 riders in a single arc. He was a whirlwind of gore. He didn't just kill the horses, he absorbed their strength, their stamina. He felt his own leg muscles reconfiguring, mimicking the powerful tendons of the Rohan steeds, allowing him to move even faster. The leader, the only one left, fell from his wounded horse and crawled backward, staring at the monster that wore a man's face. Mercer walked toward him, his boots clicking on the blood-soaked dirt. "Please," the man gasped. "Don't worry," Mercer said, his voice overlapping with the voices of the Uruks he had already consumed. "You're going to be part of something much greater than a kingdom." He consumed the leader. The memories were rich. Theoden's weakness, the presence of a spy named Wormtongue, the hidden paths of Helm's Deep. Mercer now had a map of the entire region burned into his brain. But more importantly, he discovered the existence of the ring, a focal point of power. A master control signal, Mercer whispered to himself. "If I consume the one who holds the ring, I don't just rule this world, I become its god." He looked toward the Tower of Orthanc, which stood like a black needle on the horizon. He could see the flickers of the great forges, the smoke of 1,000 fires. To Saruman, it was an industrial marvel. To Mercer, it was a buffet. He would start with the wizard, then the orcs, and by the time he reached the Black Gate, he wouldn't be leading an army. He would be the army. Every cell in his body was screaming with new potential. He began to experiment, shape-shifting his biomass into a soaring, leather-winged creature he saw in the rider's terrified memories of old legends. His bones lengthened, his skin stretched into membranes, and with a powerful thrust of his new wings, he took to the sky. As he flew over the gap of Rohan, he let out a shriek that was neither animal nor human. It was the sound of a virus that had found a new host. Below, the creatures of the dark looked up and felt a new kind of fear. The shadow of the east was old and familiar, but this new shadow, this red and black plague, was something hungry, something that couldn't be killed with elven blades or ancient spells. In the chamber of the Palantir, Saruman the White suddenly pulled his hand away from the Seeing Stone. The sphere was clouded, not with smoke, but with a pulsing, organic darkness. "What is this?" Saruman hissed, his voice trembling. "What manner of demon has Sauron unleashed?" He didn't realize that Sauron was asking the same question. The balance of power in Middle-earth had shifted in a single afternoon. The struggle between good and evil was no longer the primary conflict. A third player had entered the game, and he didn't care about crowns or honor or the fate of the world. He only cared about growth. Mercer landed on the very tip of Orthanc, his claws digging into the indestructible stone. He looked down into the circle of Isengard, seeing the thousands of Uruks milling about. He opened his maw, and instead of a roar, he released a cloud of microscopic spores, the concentrated essence of the blacklight virus. The infection of Isengard had begun. In the pits below, the first Uruk fell to his knees, his skin bubbling, his eyes turning a violent, glowing red. He didn't die. He changed. He became faster, stronger, and his mind connected to the one standing atop the tower. 1 became 2. 2 became 4. Within the hour, the white hand would be replaced by something far more crimson. Alex Mercer looked toward the east, toward the land of Mordor, and smiled. He could taste the air, and for the first time, the Dark Lord felt like prey. The transformation of Isengard was not a silent affair. It was a symphony of breaking bones and wet, tearing muscle. Inside the pits of the Ring of Isengard, 10,000 Uruk were undergoing a horrific metamorphosis. Their crude orcish DNA was being overwritten by the blacklight virus, their bodies swelling with jagged bone protrusions and claws that could rend steel. They no longer shouted for Saruman. They stood in absolute, terrifying silence, their minds fused into the singular will of the man standing atop the obsidian tower. Saruman the White was no longer a wizard. He was a living library of flesh. Mercer had consumed him in the center of his throne room, absorbing every spell, every ancient secret of the Maya, and the location of every hidden path in Middle-earth. As Mercer stood on the balcony of Orthanc, his leather jacket now shimmering with a faint, sorcerous aura stolen from the wizard's essence, he felt the Palantir pulse in his hand. Through the stone, he saw Mordor. He saw the gathered might of 100,000 orcs, the Easterlings and the Haradrim. But he also saw the fear in the great eye. Sauron had realized that his opponent was not a king or a wizard, but a biological god that turned his own soldiers against him. "March," Mercer commanded. His voice did not travel through the air. It vibrated in the marrow of the 10,000 evolved creatures below. The army of the evolved hand moved with a speed that defied nature. They did not tire, they did not eat, and they did not fear. They crossed the plains of Rohan in 2 days, leaving nothing behind. Every village they encountered was not burned, but absorbed. Every horse, every peasant, and every blade of grass was converted into biomass to fuel the swarm. By the time they reached the gates of Minas Tirith, the army had tripled in size. The city of Gondor was already under siege by the forces of Mordor, but the arrival of Mercer's swarm turned the battlefield into a slaughterhouse of 3 factions. The orcs of Gothmog turned to face the new threat, but their scimitars shattered against the hardened chitinous armor of the evolved. Mercer himself descended from the sky like a comet of gore, his arms transformed into massive, sweeping blades. He moved through the ranks of the Haradrim's Mumakil, slicing through the legs of the giant beasts and consuming the riders before they hit the ground. High above, the Witch King of Angmar descended on his fell beast, his mace glowing with pale malice. "Halt! At shadow!" the Nazgul screamed. "No man can kill me!" Mercer looked up, his face shifting into a terrifying, tooth-filled maw. "I am no man. I am the cure for this world." As the Witch King swung his mace, Mercer's arm transformed into a whip fist, lashing out with the speed of a bullet. The blade caught the Nazgul in midair, wrapping around his spectral neck. Mercer didn't just strike, he pulled. He dragged the Lord of the Nazgul down to the earth. The Witch King's sorcery flickered and died as Mercer's viral tendrils pierced the Wraith's robes. He found the hollow, cursed spirit within and did something no one in Middle-earth thought possible. He consumed the ghost. The memories of 1,000 years of darkness flooded Mercer. He felt the cold sting of the ring's corruption, the location of the 9 rings of power, wherein the ultimate weakness of the Dark Lord. The Witch King did not die, he was integrated. Mercer stood up, now wreathed in the black smoke of the Nazgul. His power doubled. The orcs of Mordor broke and fled. They had fought men, elves, and dwarves, but they could not fight the hunger of the Blacklight. Mercer didn't stop to celebrate. He turned his gaze toward the Black Gate. The city of Minas Tirith watched in horror from the walls as the man in the leather jacket led a swarm of monsters toward the Land of Shadow. Aragorn, standing on the battlements, lowered his sword. There was no glory in this victory. He knew that whatever was heading for Mordor was far worse than what had come before. At the Morannon, the Black Gate groaned open. Sauron had emptied his fortresses for one final stand. The sky turned a bruised purple as the two shadows met. On one side, the fires of Mordor. On the other, the red and black pulsing biomass of the virus. Mercer didn't send his army first. He walked alone toward the center of the plain. From the heights of Barad-dûr, a gargantuan shadow materialized. Sauron had taken form, a towering titan of black iron and orange flame, wielding a mace that rippled with the power of the One Ring. "You are a parasite," Sauron's voice shook the very foundation of the mountains. "A maggot crawling in the ruins of a world you do not understand." "I understand enough," Mercer replied, his body beginning to expand. "You are just a signal, Sauron, and I am the noise that cancels you out." The battle between the two was a collision of cosmic forces. Sauron's mace struck with the weight of a mountain, was shattering the ground and sending shockwaves for miles. But Mercer was fluid. He didn't break, he flowed. Every time a piece of his biomass was burned away by Sauron's fire, he absorbed the heat, his cells evolving on the fly to become heat-resistant. Mercer's arms grew into claws the size of trees. He leaped onto the Dark Lord, burrowing into the black armor. He wasn't trying to kill Sauron with physical force. He was infecting the magic itself. Using the knowledge stolen from Saruman and the Witch King, Mercer began to overwrite the sorcerous code of the One Ring. In the heart of Mount Doom, the One Ring began to glow with a sickening red light. It wasn't melting, it was being corrupted. The gold turned into a pulsating organic material. Sauron let out a scream that tore the sky asunder as he felt his own essence being rewritten. The eye of Barad-dûr blinked, its iris turning into the jagged amber slit of a viral predator. "The ring is mine," Mercer whispered, his tendrils finally reaching the core of Sauron's being. In one final, cataclysmic explosion of energy, the Tower of Barad-dûr didn't collapse. It transformed. The black stone was covered in miles of pulsing red veins. The land of Mordor, once a wasteland of ash, became a living, breathing landscape of flesh. The orcs, the trolls, and the dragons were all silenced, their wills extinguished and replaced by the singular mind of Alex Mercer. Sauron was gone. In his place sat Mercer on a throne of bone and shadow, his consciousness spread across every inch of the land. He looked at his hand, where a ring made of living, shifting biomass sat. He didn't need to go to Mount Doom to destroy it. He was the mountain now. He turned his gaze back toward the west, toward the shivering kingdoms of men and the hidden havens of the elves. The war for the ring was over. The era of the virus had begun. One mind, Mercer's voice echoed from every throat in Middle-earth, from the smallest infected bird to the largest mountain troll. One body, no more war, no more death, only us. As the sun rose over a world that was now a single, unified organism, the last free people of Middle-earth realized the truth. They hadn't been saved. They had been diagnosed, and the cure was final.